The kingdom of Virelia had not seen a dragon in 3 centuries. Not a single sighting. Not a burnt village. Not even a distant shadow across the northern peaks. They had become a myth told to children, something between a warning and a bedtime story. Dragons were what old books used to explain disappearances, fires, lost caravans, strange scorch marks in the wilderness, but never something real. Until the sky cracked open. It began without warning. No thunder, no storm clouds gathering, no omened birds fleeing the coast. Just silence. A deep, unnatural silence that spread across the capital city of Eldame, like something pressing a hand over the world's mouth. People noticed it first in small ways. Market stalls going quiet mid-conversation. Horses refusing to move. Dogs lying down and refusing to bark. Even the wind seemed to hesitate between buildings. Then the sun dimmed. Not like an eclipse. Like something enormous had passed between the world and the sky. And then came the shadow. At first, it looked like a cloud that didn't belong to any weather pattern. It moved too deliberately, too intelligently. It didn't drift, it advanced. Slowly, precisely, and it kept growing. Within seconds, the shadow swallowed half the city. Within moments, it covered all of Eldame. People finally looked up. That was when the screams started. Because above them, far beyond the reach of towers, higher than any known flying beast, higher than anything that should have existed in nature, something vast was descending. It was not one shape. It was many shapes, layered and shifting, like reality struggling to define what it was seeing. And then the silhouette became clear. A dragon. But that word did not feel enough anymore. Its wings alone blocked out the sun for miles. Each movement displaced clouds like they were fragile smoke. Its scales shimmered with a dark metallic sheen, as if forged rather than grown. Every beat of its wings sent tremors through the air itself. The alarms of Eldamir finally responded. Bell towers rang in panic. Horn signals screamed across the city walls. The ancient defense network, rarely tested, never truly expected to be used, activated with mechanical urgency. Old siege platforms rotated toward the sky. Archers filled battlements with trembling hands. Mags gathered in circles that had not been used in generations. And yet, no one gave an order. Because every commander in the capital was looking up at the same impossible truth. It was real. A dragon had returned. And it was not attacking. That was the most terrifying part. It circled once above the city. Slow. Controlled. Almost cautious. Like a predator unsure whether the prey had changed since the last hunt. Then it descended lower. The wind from its wings slammed into rooftops, peeling tiles and bending flags backward. Market tents collapsed. Window shutters shattered. But still, it did not strike. It stopped, hovering just above the highest tower of Eldamir's central palace. Close enough that people could see the texture of its scales. Close enough that its eyes, huge, ancient, burning with something between intelligence and memory, looked directly into the heart of the city. And then it spoke. Not with fire. Not with roar. But with voice. Deep. Resonant. Impossible. A sound that vibrated through stone, bone, and thought itself. One word. Humans. The word echoed across the capital like a judgment delivered too late. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the alarm seemed to falter, as if unsure whether they were still needed. The dragon tilted its head slightly. Not like an animal. Like something trying to reconcile memory with reality. Its gaze shifted across the city walls, the towers, the spires. It studied them. Not as targets, as evidence. And for the first time, something unthinkable happened. It hesitated. The great creature that blocked out the sun paused in the sky as if uncertain whether it should remain. As if the sight of humanity below it was not what it expected. In the royal chamber, far beneath the open sky, King Aldrin stood frozen at the stained-glass window. His hands rested on the hilt of a ceremonial sword no one believed would ever leave its sheath. Behind him, advisors shouted conflicting orders. Prepare evacuation. Activate Skyguard defenses. We should negotiate. Negotiate with that. But Aldrin didn't respond. He was watching the dragon, not as a monster, but as something that had just recognized a memory it did not want to remember. Outside, the dragon spoke again, but softer this time. Not a roar, almost a whisper. Still he. And in that moment, something shifted in the air above Eldame. Not fear, not anger, recognition. as if the sky itself had just remembered something it had long tried to forget. And far beyond the horizon, where no human eyes could yet see, other shadows began to move. The great hall of Eldamir had survived wars, coronations, assassinations, and 2 royal burnings that history preferred not to record in detail. But it had never felt this small. King Aldrin stood at the center of it, beneath banners that suddenly seemed ancient and irrelevant. The council gathered around him, lords, generals, archmages, each one speaking at once, voices overlapping in panic and disbelief. "It's a siege creature." "No, it's a scout." "A dragon hasn't been seen since the Pact of Ashfall. This violates every treaty." "There's no treaty. They're extinct." The word extinct hung in the air like a lie everyone wanted to believe hard enough to make true. Aldrin raised a hand. Silence didn't come immediately. Fear always took a moment to obey authority. Finally, the hall quieted. Through the open balcony doors behind him, the dragon remained visible above the city. Still hovering. Still watching. Still not attacking. That was worse than any firestorm. A creature that powerful should not hesitate. A creature that remembered humanity should not sound uncertain. "We are not discussing a beast," Aldrin said slowly. "We are discussing extinction-level return." A counselor stepped forward. "Then we strike first." Another nodded quickly. "Skyball cannons still exist in the northern vaults." "A relic," someone muttered. "Barely functional." "But enough," the first insisted. Aldrin turned slightly. "And if it is not alone?" That question changed the room, because no one had considered it. Not truly. Outside, the dragon shifted again in the sky, its massive silhouette casting long, moving shadows across the capital. Citizens below scattered into alleys and doorways, but even in panic, they looked upward. No one fled the city entirely. Something about the dragon's behavior made running feel unnecessary, or impossible. It was not hunting. It was waiting. The man who remembered. At the far end of the hall, leaning against a stone pillar like he didn't belong among polished nobles, stood General Marcus Hale. He had been silent the entire time. Now he stepped forward. His boots echoed once on the marble floor. Then again. "Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly, "before you issue any order, I need you to understand what we're actually seeing." A counselor scoffed. "We are seeing a dragon." Marcus didn't look at him. "That," he said, "is what we used to call them." Aldrin's gaze sharpened. "Used to." Marcus exhaled slowly, like a man choosing which truth would hurt less. "The last war wasn't a victory," he said. "It was a correction." Murmurs rippled through the council. "That war ended 300 years ago," a lord snapped. "Humans prevailed. The skies were cleared." Marcus finally turned. His expression was not fear. It was memory. "You think we prevailed because we were stronger," he said. "We didn't. We prevailed because we changed the rules of survival." The hall went still again. Aldrin narrowed his eyes. "Explain." Marcus stepped closer to the central table and placed a hand on its carved surface. "You all study history like it's a story of kingdoms," he said. "Armies, heroes, dragons versus knights." He shook his head. It wasn't that. He looked up toward the open sky, where the dragon still hovered above the city like a question waiting for an answer. It was predation. A counselor bristled. "We were prey." "We were meant to be prey," Marcus corrected. "For centuries, that is what we were. Small settlements, isolated defenses, survival through hiding, running, praying." His voice hardened slightly, and then something broke. No one interrupted. Even the dragon seemed to pause, as if listening. Marcus continued. "We stopped reacting like prey." He tapped the table once. "We started coordinating. We started predicting. We stopped thinking in villages and started thinking in networks. We stopped defending land and started defending systems." A quiet unease spread through the room. "That is not military strategy," a mage said carefully. Marcus nodded. "No, it's evolution under pressure." Aldrin's voice was lower now. "And the dragons?" Marcus hesitated. For the first time, something like reluctance crossed his face. "They noticed," he said. "The sky remembers." Outside, the dragon shifted again. But this time, it did not circle. It drifted backward, just slightly. A motion so small that most would have missed it if they weren't already terrified of missing anything at all. But Marcus saw it. And so did Aldrin. The dragon had retreated. Not from an attack. From a memory. The forgotten Fae. Marcus's voice dropped. There was a time, he said, when dragons ruled the sky because nothing on the ground mattered enough to stop them. He looked at the council. And then we became something that did not behave correctly. A pause. A hunting species expects panic, flight, dispersal, noise, fear responses. His eyes flicked upward. We stopped giving them that. The silence in the hall deepened. Instead, Marcus said, we gave them coordination. Traps, lures, decoys, systems that adapted faster than instincts could track. He exhaled. And when they adapted, so did we. Aldrin's grip tightened on the armrest of his throne. You're saying this creature outside remembers us? Marcus nodded once. I'm saying it remembers what we became when it stopped being at the top of the food chain. A distant rumble echoed through the city. Not thunder. Not siege impact. Something heavier. The dragon above Eldermere had lowered its head slightly now, as if studying not the city, but what the city represented. A system that had once learned how to fight gods in the sky. And won. Marcus spoke one final line. Barely audible, and I think it is trying to decide if we are still that thing. Outside, the dragon's eyes narrowed, and for the first time since its arrival, it did not look like it was preparing to attack. It looked like it was remembering Faye. Captain Elliot Vance had been chosen for the mission for one simple reason. He did not panic easily. That, according to the High Council, made him suitable for first contact. Elliot didn't argue. He rarely did. Arguments implied uncertainty, and uncertainty got people killed when the sky was occupied by something that should not exist. Now he stood alone at the outer gates of Eldermere, watching the world end above him in slow motion. The dragon had not moved from its position over the capital, but its presence had changed everything. The city no longer sounded like a city. It sounded like a held breath. Bells had stopped ringing. Orders had slowed. Even the wind seemed reluctant to cross the space between stone and sky. Elliot adjusted the reinforced cloak over his shoulders. Not armor. That would have been pointless. Just insulation against heat, shock, and whatever else ancient history might decide to resurrect. Behind him, the gates opened. No escort followed. No cheering crowd. Only silence. General Marcus Hale had insisted. If it sees too many of us, it will assume coordination equals threat. Marcus had said. Send one. Aldrin had agreed. That alone had told Elia how serious things were. Kings did not send one man to speak to extinction. But today they had. The walk into the ash. Elia crossed the broken outer road alone. The fields outside Eldermere were scarred. Old scars, not new ones. Blackened stone formations half buried in soil. Craters that no longer had names. Ruins that predated any living historian. He had studied them once. They were classified as pre-packed anomalies. Now he understood what that meant. Things that survived a war humanity had chosen not to remember. Above him, the dragon's shadow moved slowly across the land, tracking him without urgency. Not hunting. Observing. Like a scientist watching an experiment resume after centuries. Elias stopped at the edge of the scorched plain, where grass stopped growing and the earth turned to ash-colored glass. He looked up, and saw it clearly for the first time from ground level. The dragon was not just large. It was structured. Its body did not resemble natural evolution. Its scales shifted subtly with internal light patterns, like embedded systems responding to stimuli. Its wings were not purely organic either. Veins of something darker ran through them, forming geometric symmetry too precise for biology alone. Elias swallowed once, then spoke. His voice carried farther than it should have. Can you understand me? A pause. The dragon tilted its head downward, and answered. Yes. The single word vibrated through the air like a physical pressure wave. Elia did not step back. That, too, was intentional. Then I am Captain Elia Vance of Eldermere, he said. I have been sent to establish communication. The dragon did not respond immediately. Instead, it studied him. Not his weapons. Not his posture. Something deeper. Something like recognition. Finally, it spoke again. You should be extinct. The sentence of memory. Elia felt the weight of that sentence more than Faye. Not accusation. Not threat. Observation. You are mistaken, Elia replied calmly. We are very much alive. A pause. Above him, the dragon shifted slightly in the sky. Wind pressed down harder. Dust lifted from the ground in slow spirals. You were not meant to persist, the dragon said. Your pattern was incomplete. Elia frowned slightly. Pattern. The dragon's eyes narrowed. Prey patterns collapse under sustained pressure, it said. Your collapse did not occur. Elia understood then that this was not conversation in the human sense. It was classification. He was being analyzed. He chose his words carefully. We adapted. That word caused something subtle to change in the air. The dragon went still. Completely still. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Adapted, it repeated, as if testing the concept against memory. Then, something happened in the sky above. Far beyond the main dragon, shapes began to emerge from cloud cover. At first, Elia thought they were birds. Then he realized the scale was wrong. Much, much wrong. The watching sky. One by one, they appeared. Not one dragon. Not two. But dozens. No, hundreds. They did not descend. They did not circle. They simply existed above the clouds, arranged in vast formations that suggested intention. They were not attacking. They were watching. And waiting. Elia's throat tightened slightly, but he did not move. He had been trained for panic suppression. General Hale did not mention additional units. He said quietly. The dragon above him did not look away from him. They are not units, it said. A pause. They are witnesses. Elias' mind ran through every possible interpretation and rejected all of them. Witnesses to what? Before he could ask, the dragon continued. You are incorrect, it said again, but softer this time. This outcome should not exist. Elia felt something cold settle in his chest. What outcome? He asked. The dragon did not answer immediately. Instead, it lowered itself slightly. Not attacking. Descending. Until its enormous face was closer to the ground. Closer to him. Close enough that Elia could see ancient scars along its jawline. Damage that had not healed in centuries. You stopped behaving correctly, it said. Elia frowned. Correctly according to what? The dragon hesitated. That hesitation was new. Uncalculated. I do not know, it admitted. And for the first time since the sky cracked open above Eldame, the dragon sounded uncertain. The moment the sky remembers. From the city behind him, Elia heard distant movement. Not alarms. Not panic. Something deeper. Metal shifting beneath stone. Old systems waking. Things no one had touched in generations. The dragon above him reacted instantly. Its wings flexed. The air pressure dropped. Elia felt it before he saw it. The shift in balance between threat and recognition. The dragon was afraid. Not of him. Not of the city. But of what the city was becoming. Elia spoke carefully. We are not what we used to be, he said. The dragon's eyes locked onto him. And that is what concerns us, it replied. Above them, the sky remained full of silent watchers. And for the first time since dragons returned, neither side made the first move. Because both were beginning to understand the same terrifying possibility. The war had never truly ended. It had only been waiting for something new to wake it. Elia Vance did not hear the city open. He felt it. A deep vibration that did not belong to footsteps, or siege engines, or even collapsing stone. It came from below the world, beneath the roots of Eldame, beneath the old foundations, beneath the layers of history that was supposed to stay buried. The ground itself remembered something. Behind him, the dragon shifted in the air. Not aggressively. Not yet. But attentively. As if it had just recognized a familiar frequency. Elia slowly turned his head toward the capital. What is that? He asked quietly. No answer came from the dragon. Because the dragon was no longer looking at him. It was looking through the city. The vault beneath the kingdom. Deep under Eldame, where royal decrees had once forbidden even excavation, a door that had not been opened in 500 years began to move. Stone panels separated with mechanical precision. Not crumbling. Not breaking. Unsealing. Light, cold, artificial, blue-white, spilled into corridors that had never seen daylight. Runes etched into metal floors ignited in sequence, traveling like awakened thought through dormant systems. One by one, locks released. Not magical locks. Not mechanical locks. Something older. Something designed by minds that did not trust either. In the deepest chamber, A single word was projected across the walls in shifting light. Origin Protocol, active. Above ground. No one had ordered it. No living king had authorized it. And yet it was happening anyway. Because it was never meant to require permission. The memory of a different humanity. General Marcus Hale stood in the royal command chamber, staring at the trembling crystal interface embedded in the floor. He did not look surprised. Only resigned. King Aldrin stepped beside him. "You said we were not what we used to be," the king said quietly. "Was this what you meant?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched as distant parts of the city began to respond. Old towers, once decorative, now dormant, shifted. Panels opened along their sides. Structures that had been disguised as architecture began revealing internal frameworks of impossible complexity. Something vast was waking. "Yes," Marcus finally said. Aldrin's voice dropped. "What exactly did we become?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "We became what survives after being hunted long enough," he said. The floor trembled again. "Not soldiers," Marcus continued. "Not kingdoms." A pause. "Systems." The sky reacts. Outside, Elia looked up just in time to see the dragon recoil slightly. Not far. Not dramatically. But enough. Enough to confirm something had changed. The air around the city shimmered faintly, like reality itself was adjusting its expectations. The dragon's wings tensed. Above it, the hundreds of watching shapes shifted formation for the first time since their arrival. They were no longer passive observers. They were evaluating. Elia took a slow step backward. The dragon did not follow him. Instead, it spoke toward the city. "What have you done?" The question was not aimed at Elia. It was aimed at the world beneath him. And the world answered. Awakening. Across Eldamay, hidden structures unfolded. What had once been mistaken for decorative stonework along palace walls split open to reveal layered metallic interiors. Thin lines of energy traced through streets like veins awakening in a sleeping body. In the oldest district, beneath abandoned temples, circular platforms rose silently from the ground, each one inscribed with patterns that hurt to look at directly, not because they were magical, but because they were too precise. In the royal chamber, Marcus placed a hand on the interface. "This was built before the pact," he said quietly. Aldrin turned sharply. "Before the Dragon Wars." Marcus nodded. "During them." The king froze. "That's impossible. Humans didn't have this kind of technology." "We didn't," Marcus interrupted. "Not at first." A pause. "Then we stopped asking permission to develop it." The truth of survival. The city's transformation was not violent. It was inevitable. Every dormant system activated in layers, like memories returning to a mind that had refused to forget everything at once. Defense grids that had been disguised as irrigation systems recalibrated. Old communication lines that had once been dismissed as myth reconnected across districts. And deep beneath the palace, something massive began to rotate. Slowly, like a planet waking up inside a machine. Elia felt the air pressure change. The dragon felt it too. Its voice lowered. "This was not in the historical record," it said. Marcus's voice came through the open chamber echoes, though he was not speaking directly to the dragon. It was never meant to be. What was buried? Elia's mind raced. He had been trained in every known history of the Dragon Wars. Sieges. Heroic last stands. Ancient treaties. But none of them mentioned this. None of them mentioned cities that were also machines. Kingdoms that were also algorithms. Humanity that had stopped behaving like a species and started behaving like an evolving response. The dragon descended another few meters. Slower now. Cautious again. Elia looked up at it. For the first time, he understood something important. The dragon was not measuring strength. It was measuring return probability. "How long have you been awake?" the dragon asked the city. Marcus answered. "We never slept," he said. A pause. "We adapted." The shift. The sky changed. Not visually. Conceptually. The hundreds of watching dragons above the clouds stopped drifting randomly. Their formation stabilized into rigid geometry. Perfect spacing. Perfect alignment. Perfect attention. Like a judgment system completing input analysis. Elia felt something behind his eyes. A pressure. Like being observed by something that did not need sight. The dragon in front of him finally stepped back. Not fearfully. Not fully. But enough. "Then the variable has changed," it said quietly. And for the first time since its arrival, it was no longer certain what humanity was, only that it was no longer what it remembered. Behind Elia, Eldame continued to wake, and beneath it, something vast and patient began to respond to being remembered again. The dragon did not leave. Neither did it attack. It simply remained above the shattered silence of Eldame, as if the world had become a question it no longer knew how to answer. Elia Vance stood alone beneath it, the ash field stretching behind him like a scar left deliberately unhealed. The city behind him was no longer a city in the traditional sense. It was awake now, fully, incompletely, and dangerously aware of itself. He could feel it in the ground. A slow, rhythmic pulse. Not heartbeat. Not machinery. Something in between. Above him, the dragon's gaze shifted repeatedly between Elia, the capital, and the sky beyond it where hundreds of its kind remained locked in silent formation. The watching dragons had not moved since the activation of the Origin Protocol, but their stillness no longer felt passive. It felt restrained, like something enormous had been told to wait, and was deciding whether it still had to obey. The final descent. The lead dragon began to descend. Slowly. Not like an attack. Not like a threat. Like an answer being delivered in person because distance was no longer acceptable. Wind did not rise this time. The air did not fracture. Instead, everything seemed to quiet further, as if the world itself was making space for what was about to happen. Elia did not move. He had long since accepted that movement would not matter anymore. The dragon landed, not crashing, not shaking the earth, but placing itself down with deliberate control, as though even gravity required consent now. Its massive form settled in front of the gates of Eldame, casting a shadow that reached beyond the city walls and into the awakening districts beyond. And then, for the first time since its arrival, it bowed its head. The question that was not an order. Please, the dragon said. The word was quiet, not weak, carefully chosen. The sound carried a weight that made Elia's chest tighten, not from fear, but from recognition of something older than fear. Tell us, the dragon continued, you are not them anymore. Elia frowned slightly. Them. The dragon's eyes flickered. For the first time, uncertainty was no longer subtle. It was visible. You changed, it said. You adapted incorrectly. A pause. That is what we remember. Elia turned slightly, glancing back toward the city. Behind him, Eldamir was no longer just architecture. Lines of energy pulsed through it like veins beneath skin. Ancient systems aligned. Structures repositioned themselves subtly in ways no human engineer would have called natural. He understood, suddenly, why the dragons were unsettled. Humanity had not simply survived them. It had learned from them, and then gone further, much further. The king steps forward. The gates of Eldamir opened, not by command, not by ritual, but because they no longer recognized the concept of being closed. King Aldrin stepped out first, followed by General Marcus Hale. Neither of them carried weapons. They didn't need to. Behind them, faint hums echoed through the city like a waking organism adjusting its posture. The dragons had lifted slightly as they approached. Not aggressively. Carefully, as if recalibrating expectations in real time. Marcus stopped a few paces behind Elia. Aldrin stopped beside him. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence between species was enormous. Then the dragon spoke again. You are not identical to your recorded patterns, it said. Marcus nodded once. No, Aldrin added quietly, we are still humans. The dragon's eyes narrowed slightly. That is not what we question, it replied. A pause. What we question is continuity. The memory of fire. Above them, the other dragons began to move again. Not advancing, not retreating, but adjusting. A slow, synchronized shift across the sky, like a vast intelligence updating its model of reality. Elia felt it then, a subtle pressure in the air, like observation becoming evaluation. The dragon in front of them lowered its head further. When we last recorded your kind, it said, you were predictable. Its voice softened. You burned in patterns we understood. Marcus spoke carefully. We learned. The dragon responded instantly. That is the problem. A long silence followed. Even the wind seemed to hesitate again. The truth beneath survival. The dragon continued. When prey learns to resist, it becomes a variable. It tilted its head slightly. When prey learns to coordinate, it becomes a system. A pause. When prey becomes a system, its voice lowered further. It stops being prey. Elia felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not fear. Understanding. The dragon was not accusing them. It was classifying them, trying to decide where humanity now belonged in the structure of existence it had once believed stable. King Aldrin stepped forward slightly. "What are you afraid of?" he asked. That question changed the air. Even the distant dragons in the sky paused. The lead dragon did not answer immediately. When it finally spoke, its voice was quieter than before. "Memory error," it said. A pause. "You should not have reached this state." Marcus exhaled slowly. "And yet we did." The dragon's gaze sharpened. "Yes." Another pause. "That is why we retained." The sky decides. Above them, the formation of dragons tightened. Perfect geometry. Perfect alignment. No longer simply watching. Deciding. Elia felt it before anyone spoke. A shift in intent that made the air itself feel heavier. The lead dragon lifted its head slightly. "You are still humans," it said again. But now the statement carried no uncertainty. Only weight. "And that is why," it continued, "we must decide what humans are now." Silence fell across Eldame. Even the awakened city seemed to pause its internal movement. Marcus stepped forward one final time. "Then decide carefully," he said. The dragon's eyes locked onto him. "We are not the same as before," Marcus added. A pause. A faint hum passed through the city beneath them. "And neither are you." For the first time, something like tension flickered through the sky. Not hostility. Not peace. Something older. Something unresolved. The dragon slowly lifted its wings. Not in preparation for flight, but in acknowledgement. The sky above Eldamir darkened, not from shadow, but from presence. And in that moment, both humanity and dragons understood the same truth. The old world order had ended long ago. They were now standing in whatever had replaced it. And neither side was certain which of them had become the apex. Only that the question had finally retained, and this time, it was asking both species to answer together.